My name is Brittany Jenkins. We are going to be talking about advancing health equity through coalition building. And it's just such a powerful way to achieve your organizational successes collaboratively with other organizations and the community. So let's get into it. Brittany Jenkins. I'm the founder and CEO at Jenkins Public Health Consulting. I'm actually from Indianapolis, Indiana, and raised in Kokomo, Indiana, where I went to high school out there and also went to college at Indiana State and Ball State University. I am a certified health education specialist and have been working with health organizations, public health, healthcare organizations for the last 6 years independently as a consultant, and also been helping organizations with their project planning, development, implementation, coalition building, and so many more things. I'm also mentor current and aspiring public health professionals to land rewarding jobs like mid to senior level jobs in public health. And that's been amazing, not only helping organizations thrive, but preparing the next generation or current generation to enhance the public health workforce. I've managed over 7 million in budgets and grants over the past 10 years in the public health and healthcare industry, helping organizations sustain their capacity and build on these resources that are available to the community. I was former chair of the Smoke Free Indy Coalition, which was an amazing opportunity. At the time when I became chair, my husband, he was like, you would have thought that she was president of the United States. I was so excited about it because I saw the potential and the amount of things that we were working on collaboratively as a coalition. And there were so many successes that came from this. And really, what we're going to be talking about is some of those successes that came from the coalition and how the 4 E's framework came about. While chair for the Smoke Free Indy Coalition, we were able to increase membership and engagement of the coalition by 50% in less than 12 months. And that is something that we did collaboratively by being laser focused on who our partners are, how can we engage with them, how can we use their skills and strengths and resources so that we can achieve the goals of the coalition. And we did it in so many ways and more by also including the community. So that's one of those photos of us working collaboratively on tobacco filter cleanup happening downtown Indianapolis. So here are some of the agencies that I've served through Jenkins Public Health Consulting, whether it's the Texas Health and Human Services, helping them to identify target areas and health issues happening in their state and making sure that people have the resources needed to improve their health outcomes. The Center for Supportive Communities, they were focused on truancy for high school, middle school students and addressing social determinants of health that led to truancy, which was really interesting. Meds Plus Consulting, they are a pharmacy implementing a public health program, which you really don't see a lot. And so helping them to develop onboarding recruitment strategies for patients who are living with type 2 diabetes. This is current, ongoing, and they have so many successes from having a strategic recruitment strategy and retention strategy to serve those patients living with type 2 diabetes. Other agencies include the National Association for County and City Health Officials, the Don't Drive Drowsy Foundation, which I love so much. And I connected with some of these agencies in Nashville, Tennessee. Pathways is a women's shelter, Village Tree Health, Bivens Tucker, and a wellness organization, Boon Me. They are also like a holistic nutrition organization focused on reducing health disparities and access to healthy, nutritious foods. And really, the model for a lot of the work that I do when helping organizations, educating, training, or consulting with them is when we improve outreach, we improve outcomes, right? That's outreach of our programs, services, outreach when we're connecting with other partnerships or partners and organizations. We really improve the outcomes of our programs and we improve the health outcomes of our communities. So, through that, I've established a 5 step community impact framework. We're going to touch on one part of that framework today, but I want to make sure that you know what that framework looks like. But the 5 step community impact framework is this framework that I believe that every organization should go through or have strong areas in to really improve outcomes of their programs and initiatives and obviously health outcomes of the community. First is equipping staff and stakeholders, making sure everyone is equipped through bias and empathy training and making sure everyone has the same cohesive message when you're talking about the organization, tracking your performance in the biggest and smallest ways so that you can see how you are reaching your community, what gaps exist, and how we can collectively improve those outcomes. Building capacity is which we're going to touch on today. And so, how can we build capacity in funding, partners, community, resources, etc., so that we can achieve our organization's mission or the coalition's mission and goals? Market effectively includes online and offline marketing strategies that ensure that you're reaching your target population no matter where they're located, rural, urban, online, offline. Also being mindful of those who are struggling or dealing with the digital divide. And then impact communities as that community engagement strategy that actually has helped organizations save money when they have a strong community engagement strategy in place. I think one organization, they were able to see that they saved about $28,000 per staff member for having a community engagement strategy in place. And that's based on the work that we've done with them, because there's really no research out there showing how can you quantify the cost of community engagement. And we've been able to help organizations do that. So again, we're going to focus on the third step of the framework, and that's building capacity. There's so many ways to build capacity, like I mentioned, in funding, resources, partnerships, community, which is a lot of times we're kind of valuing or generalizing how we can utilize community to build capacity. So building capacity is essential to sustainability of your efforts. If you don't do anything, coalition building, it's the number one way of building capacity to sustain your efforts and share resources. So if you have limited staff or funding, that's where you can lean on. That's what you can lean on to ensure that. But it's important to know that coalition building is more than policy change. A lot of the times when I'm talking to organizations on what are they working towards when it comes to coalition building, the only focus is policy change. And though that's an essential component to changing your community or your state at the local, state, or federal level, coalitions are doing way more than that to ensure policy systems, environmental changes. And so that's why we're here today for sure. And so I want to make sure I define what coalition building is first. It's the process of forming alliances among various groups, organizations, and individuals with a shared goal, allowing them to leverage combined resources and efforts for a greater impact. We can't do this alone. There's power in numbers, right? This collaborative approach is essential in areas like public health and social change, where diverse stakeholders unite to address complex issues and drive policy systems, social and environmental improvements. Some key aspects of members that should be a part of coalitions to ensure that there's action oriented is being outspoken, knowing what the issues are and not being afraid to address them for the best interest of the community, and even just beyond the sustainability of a coalition. Because some of the times people are just doing things to sustain the coalition, but there's no action related to efforts to improve the outcomes of the community or the policy, the system that you're trying to change, right? Being forward thinking, being aware of what's happening with policy change and trying to stay ahead of that and seeing how the coalitions together can make that happen. Being community focused. Some coalitions lack members from the community and they're only partners from other organizations. And so it's important to make sure that we're community focused in this because, again, there's power in numbers and communities. The people from the community are aware of what's happening. They know the history of the community, and them coupled together with our expertise and our resources is a powerful thing. And then being action oriented, like I mentioned, it's that theory of change. What's the end goal? What can A and B do so that we have that outcome that we're looking for? And so coalition building again ties into coalition capacity building because it allows for a more comprehensive approach to addressing any type of issue, right? With coalition building, you have task forces, or some people just work together as one and then they prioritize those efforts. But those task forces really allow you to come together and figure out what the priorities are of the coalition and address those by having individuals within those task forces with the expertise that allow for success within. I do want to share a case study. These are just some of those different case studies that allow you to see the successes that can come from a coalition that is built with these different components that allow it to be successful. But the Farmers Market Coalition is their mission is to strengthen farmers markets throughout the United States. I know Indianapolis, Indiana has a ton of farmers markets and they have collaborated with the health departments in different ways to make sure people have access to food. So I thought this would be a great case study. They bring together diverse stakeholders, including cooperative extensions, food security advocates, departments of agriculture, and non-governmental organizations. So I want you guys to listen to that and see what type of organizations exist. They're not just organizations within our community, they're also partnering with federal organizations who have buy-in to their efforts. They create a robust network of support for farmer market operators, and they serve as a national hub, locates allies, share best practices, and impacts public policy to benefit farmers markets. Through educational programming and networking opportunities, they foster state and regional associations, enabling markets to create safe, welcoming space for all community members, right? So they're not just doing the work alone, they're making sure that they're collaborating. throughout. They're making sure people in the state know they exist, not just people in their community or their target area. So their coalition building efforts aim to achieve a triple bottom line: fair prices for farmers, fresh produce for consumers, and revitalized community spaces, which I really love that. And one thing about this conversation when it comes to capacity building, coalition building, people have mistakenly thought that coalitions are similar to the ideas of communities of practice. And though that's okay, that conversation piece is really community of practices are when people come together to share knowledge and ideas, but there's no real action or goal behind the reason why they're there. So that's why coalition building and community of practice are a little bit different, though it can bring that idea up in your head. The goal of creating a coalition is making sure it's high impact, right? Not just working towards efforts during our meetings, but outside of the meetings. And then also making sure meetings are action oriented, which we'll jump into. So successful coalitions attempt to minimize rules and requirements and just dive in. I see people stuck at just making it all perfect, which we do need those guidelines in place to ensure that there's no confusion of what the goals and initiatives are. However, we need to utilize the resources that we have now to take action now, right? Procrastination kills the cat, but at the same time, we need to continuously take action towards the work that we're doing versus trying to make sure that everything's perfect before we take that action, because then there's no result, right? I wanted to dive in on what the difference between partnerships and collaborations are. I hear a lot of people talking about partners, but they're actually collaborators, right? The difference between the two are that partnerships are more legally binding. You typically have an actual contract in place about what you and your partner are going to do together for the whatever outcome or requirement, right? Such as a grant that is actually closely managed, making sure everyone is in alignment with what those goals are, the outcomes are, etc. And then it's a long-term relationship. Typically with coalition buildings, there's no contract in place unless you're working on something bigger or it's called for that. But that's where you see more of a collaborative approach. It's not legally binding. You might have a MOU, such as a memorandum of understanding in place. It's independent, right? These agencies are still independent and they can choose or choose not to provide such resource to support the initiative. And most times it is a short-term relationship. I couldn't find any statistics on how long coalitions statistically last, but the coalitions that I've been a part of and aware of, they've been lasting for over a decade. And that's important to ensure that not only are we working towards policy change, and if it happens, that we're sustaining and making sure that the community that we live in or a service area, they're also following the policy change laws and rules. So that's why that continuous support of a coalition, the sustainability of a coalition is essential. Okay. So the challenges of a coalition, and there's endless challenges, okay? But some of them include competing priorities. Coalition members often have different organizational goals and limited resources. And so they'll bring the organizational goals to the coalition, which is what you're supposed to do, and then see what is the priority. But sometimes everyone wants to prioritize organizational goals, but it's really seeing what's the priority and how does this benefit the organization, the coalition, the community as a whole, not just one organization or one part of a community. So this can lead to conflicts and reduced commitment to the coalition efforts because maybe you're not feeding into what their priority is, so they want to step away. But this is all about a collaborative approach. This is all about the long-term gain that it requires for us to see success in our efforts, right? And so with the long-term gain, we know that everything isn't going to always go our way. So we have to still put in the effort to work towards the ultimate goal of the coalition so that when the priority comes up for our organization, we will have people at the table who's ready to support us as well. But that's why it's important to establish clear goals and a common vision that aligns with the priority of all the members, not just the lead agency or not just the organization who's getting paid to lead the coalition. It's the priority of all members, and regularly communicate the benefits of the coalition to each member's objectives, right? Then you have external pressures. When it comes to external pressures, funding limitations, which everyone has funding limitations. That's like the number one thing people say is the funding limitations. But what can we do with the money that we do have? Or who can we lean on for the gap in the funding that we don't have? Coalition building. And so those external pressures can either make us or break us, and including the policy changes, right? We know what's happening with policy change that's affecting a lot of the things that we're doing within our organization. And that's why we need to lean on our coalition members to help overcome these things. Develop flexible strategies to overcome that allow the coalition to adapt to those changing circumstances, secure funding sources outside of just your organization. So, for example, with the Smoke Free Indie Coalition, there was times with Truth Initiative, which is an organization focused on reducing smoking rates and opioid drug use. They were funding some of the food for our coalition meetings and events so that it was even more engaging. And that wasn't something we had to come out of pocket or utilize grant funds for. So there's different ways to share funds when you're financially can't, right? There's even ways for you to share staff members, have that MOU in place to share staff members if funding is an issue. So maybe a staff member from another agency who is a part of that coalition is coming to volunteer for a community event where you yourself or your staff couldn't attend, but you wanted to also make sure there was representation there. So how can someone share staff? There's deeper ways, right? For you can share staff members beyond just community engagement when it comes, there's other ways like when it comes to program implementation and so forth. The third one of the third challenges is sustaining engagement with a coalition. And this is probably the number one issue, really, is sustaining engagement. A lot of coalitions are burnt out. The members are burnt out because they forget the fact that everything that we're doing, some of those big, hard tasks are in long term gains, such as the policy change. And people are giving up, right? Because if you don't see end in sight or you put in so much work and you don't see any successes or small successes, then people are willing to give up because that's just not their priority anymore. So, how are we sustaining engagement and making sure that we are continuously making sure that people understand that it's the long game? It's a long game. Foster a sense of ownership among members by involving them in the decision making process, recognizing their contributions, and providing regular updates on where we are in such the actions that align with the goals of the coalition and the achievements that's come up thus far, right? Not only highlighting the ultimate success that we work towards, but the fact that people are showing up every time to make sure that this outcome is achieved. Okay. So a few benefits of coalition building is, like I said before, there's power in numbers. All right. We can't do anything alone. And if we attempt to build a coalition alone with just the people that we are in a small group of or just an organization, it's not going to be as strong or sustainable. And again, those resources aren't going to be as great. Another benefit is reduced burnout. When it comes to doing anything, the work that we're doing, let's say policy change, it helps to reduce burnout because we're leaning on our colleagues or on those other experts to provide knowledge and expertise on how to navigate policy change, right? Some people know the system, some people don't. Some people have that personality to go up and talk to a legislator, some others don't. Some are those research focused individuals who have the statistics to show and share what outcomes are needed for success. And so if someone's trying to do all these things, we're going to eventually be burnt out, right? So how can we lean on each other within the coalition to reduce that burnout? Also, professional development. Coalition building isn't always just working towards a specific outcome, where we're also learning while we're working towards those specific outcomes, right? So, what specific topics would your coalition need to enhance their knowledge to that will also support the success? So, again, with the policy change, I recall we did so long ago when I was part of the chair of a coalition, they did strategic planning around how do we amplify awareness of our coalition that leads to success. So, we weren't just in there doing the work, we were also learning from the state. We were learning from stakeholders. There's endless training opportunities to enhance your knowledge while you're part of a member of a coalition, not just working towards the goals. Collective marketing, right? So taking the needs of your coalition, the achievements of your coalition, etc., and marketing them in your different platforms, online, offline, to extend your reach, letting people know what your needs are, what you're working towards. Are you recruiting new members? Do we need new partners that specialize in this area? What specific area? Collective marketing is essential because if we're only going by word of mouth, you're leaving a lot of things on the table that will, through collective marketing online, it will extend your reach by far. Resource sharing, I've said this many times, I'll continue to say it throughout. Sharing time, like allowing other staff members to volunteer at your agencies for those community engagement events, sharing funding, also sharing resources, right? Allowing another company to use your print materials or to print the materials at your organization because maybe you don't have the type of funding to print those materials. I've seen many times organizations within those coalitions, they're allowing other agencies to use their in-house resources versus depending on their own in-house resources because they can use those funds to do that. Because we know with grant funds, there's a lot of different restrictions on how we can market or run ads or etc. And then it's more efficient and effective to have a coalition versus trying to do everything alone. And then with the effectiveness, again, we're using multiple voices to amplify awareness of our initiatives. This case study is the Los Angeles Food Equity Roundtable. I love what they're doing. I was actually in LA with some family and heard someone talking about this equity roundtable. I'm like, this is really cool stuff that they're doing. And so I'm going to highlight this case study. They are a coalition that brings over 200 community-based organizations and more than 100 food system experts nationwide to collaboratively address food insecurity. So again, they're not just focused on agencies within their community. They're bringing in agencies and experts nationwide. This extensive network has facilitated the creation of a comprehensive strategic action plan incorporating diverse perspectives and expertise. The roundtable's efforts have garnished significant support, leading to the formation of the Office of Food Equity and the launch of the Food Equity Fund. So just remember that the work that you're doing that you might feel is small might lead to a great impact that improves the health of people nationwide. So keep doing what you guys are doing. There are further strengthening collaborative efforts towards a resilient and equitable food system in LA, but these things can be duplicated within your local city and state or service area. I know with the Marion County Public Health Department, their coalition was overseeing like 5 cities, but the county itself was serving way more cities than that. So the impact is usually greater than what we might perceive it to be. So continue to work towards those things and utilize these types of organizations as case studies and even take a piece of what they're doing and try to implement it in your local area. So here are some essential elements that support coalitions: that shared vision and collaborative goals, diverse member recruitment and engagement plans. With the diverse members, that's crucial. But without diversity, you have a gap in your knowledge. You have a gap in awareness of what's really going on. And you're really not doing things in an equitable manner to ensure people have access or to ensure people are knowledgeable about the policy change that could be occurring in your community. You also, when it comes to diverse members, you might not be getting the input or the knowledge about the communities that you're serving because you don't have diverse members at the table. And like deeper about diverse groups is we have multi-sectoral partnerships, which is when you're including organizations and community. A lot of the times we're talking about only having partners at the table that are part of our coalition, which is that cross-sectoral partnership. And that again is another piece of that diversity, right? Not just diversity in race and ethnicity, but diversity in the types of partners that we're working to have at the table of our coalition. And so making sure there's a recruitment process in place to ensure that you have diverse members, organizations, even businesses, right? We want businesses at the table because typically they don't have restrictions on how they can use their funds. Us as nonprofit organizations typically do have restrictions on how they can use their funds, and you're a lot more limited. So, how can we partner with those business owners in different ways to share resources, right? They might be able to have individuals for their company come and volunteer for a community engagement event or provide some subject matter expertise in some other way that you never thought of that could benefit your organization. They just typically don't operate in the same mindset as a business. And you can have that unique perspective come in and tell you more about how to operate your nonprofit like a business. And then having engagement plans. How can we keep our members engaged and be culturally relevant in those engagement plans and opportunities to maintain sustainability of the members of the coalition? Working groups and or task forces are crucial as well so that we're not putting all the ideas right there on the table and expecting everyone to work on the same thing. And there's just so many different initiatives going on. So splitting those things up in different task forces and putting people's skills where they belong or where they prefer is crucial again. Also, with those strategic efforts versus those short term or short lived tactics, The strategic efforts are going to carry you way further and be a lot more efficient than those one off tactics that typically only push the needle a little bit. It doesn't really push it far enough for it to really create change. Resource mobilization, sustainability plans, what happens if X, Y, and Z occurs? What will happen to the coalition if the policy doesn't change? What happens to the coalition if we don't get these fundings? Having those sustainability plans in place is crucial. And then you can know if we don't get the funds for this coalition, you'll have a plan in place on what to do next. There was a question submitted prior to the training about coalition building, and they were asking, like, hey, we want to build a coalition, but we don't have someone to pay. That happens, right? Obviously, we know the only way to pay people is to get funding through donations, grants, and so forth. But if you don't have that in place, sometimes people are pro bono. But is that something that they want to do? Maybe not. So if you don't have the funds to pay someone to operate a coalition, you have to think of that plan B. And sometimes someone won't get paid. And that's just how you might have to navigate that. And you could use a community champion to step in to lead the organization or operate like the inner workings of that coalition if you don't have a staff member that you can pay. So again, with that diverse member recruitment, how are we utilizing those community champions who are familiar with the organization? They definitely have buy-in on what we're trying to do, and they are recruiting other members of the community to be a part of this coalition. So that could be a way. There's a lot of people who we worked with in the past that either they were retired or again, they're super dedicated to the outcomes that the coalition is trying to achieve. And then we have the inclusive practices and conflict resolution strategies. That's really part of that beginning stage of the development of your coalition, having those things outlined, who is going to address what, and then what's that process for if someone might need to not be a part of the coalition anymore. But conflict is going to arise because that's just so many moving pieces of a coalition, so many different priorities. And again, there's so many needs. So that conflict resolution piece is crucial and a lot of people overlook. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the 4 E's discussion. So when it comes to identifying what your capacity needs are for your coalition, based on the responses of people who completed the needs assessment, either the coalition is not even thought of being built or some are part of different coalitions. But these are questions to identify the capacity needs. Does the performance goals of the coalition and the outcomes of the coalition indicate a need for support? You're always going to need additional support, whether those are new partners or you might need letters of support towards your initiative. But how does that align with the goals and outcomes indicated within the coalition? Can an organization implement the grant or program at current capacity? So sometimes you can bring your current initiatives to the coalition and say, hey, this program or grant is in alignment with the ultimate vision of the coalition. Can we get buy in from our members to help implement this? And so if you can get buy in from the coalition to support your organizational needs, that's a big win for you, right? That builds on that capacity need. And that's what's happened a lot of the times as well. Can we achieve our strategic goals faster with support? The quick answer, of course, is yes. But then also, more support doesn't always mean a better outcome. Sometimes that can lead to more chaos, more confusion, more conflict. So, really thinking about who's at the table supporting your current needs and initiatives and going from there. What are the current gaps in resource needs, and then seeing who has those resources and who may be willing to provide that for the agency or the coalition, right? Sometimes when it comes to sharing resources, there may be, hey, you do this for me, I'll do this for you. But again, I must use Truth Initiative as an example. They didn't need anything or desire or want anything in return for providing funds for the specific event that they provided funds for. So sometimes that agency is willing to do that because they are a strong partner. They are a partner who's in here for the long run and may not have an ask right now, but they might have an ask in the future. What relationships should we establish now for mutual benefit later? So maybe right now you're in the phase of identifying partners, right? You don't have a role in ask other than to join our coalition. And if your vision aligns with ours, I'll jump into that in a moment. But what relationships should you establish now for mutual benefit? Also, are you establishing relationships with the mayor? Who is going to help benefit what your needs are right now? Don't just think inside the box, think outside the box, think bigger than what you believe can be possible for your coalition. What are the training needs and costs associated? Like we said, someone mentioned, hey, we don't have the funds to hire someone to lead the coalition. What do we do? That's important to assess what the needs are and figuring out plans to addressing those gaps in resources. Also, with the training needs, a lot of people don't know how to build a coalition from scratch, from start to end. So, what training needs are important? And is that training essential for all members? Likely not. Other members of a coalition might not need to know how to build a coalition from scratch, but they might need training in marketing or, let's say, program development, so forth. And so making sure that your coalition is bringing in key speakers and subject matter experts so that your members are always up to date on their knowledge and skills. And then it also benefits their organization, which pours into the community. So it's like this full circle effect. It's not just what you're doing for your coalition, but those things are going to benefit communities outside of that as well. Long-term strategies versus short-term tactics. Short-term tactics are really just making a post about a policy that's happening and that the support that you need versus going out in the community to recruit people to show up at the state house with you and to join your coalition. Those are those long-term relationship building. That's that long-term advocacy pieces that we need for people to support what's happening in our community and to be knowledgeable. So creating a social media post is that one little tactic that's going to let how many engagements people who engage with your post see what's happening, but after that, who's actually taking action? Who's actually reaching out to your organization like, hey, I want to support this initiative? It's not happening because it's only those little tactics. So, what can we do to go a step further beyond the grain to say, I'm trying to recruit people and different partners to be a part of this long term game? So, think about everything you're doing to build or sustain or to spread awareness about your coalition. That's going to be more long term versus this one time little tactic that doesn't, you don't see any results from. So we're going to jump into what a partnership analysis is. I love doing stuff like this, the partnership analysis. I think it shows you a lot about what resources are available in your community or your target area and what resources don't exist or are lacking. So I'm curious to know if people have conducted a partnership analysis. I would love to know or indicate that with the heart. Maybe that's even better than the chat because this is again that long-term strategy versus those short-term tactics. Right. If you're asking someone like, hey, you should help us with this initiative, that's like a short-term thing. They're helping you with that one thing. But that long term is looking at that partner, doing a full analysis to see if they're going to benefit you now and in the future, and that's gonna be a lot more effective. Okay. So a partnership analysis is a mandatory tool that I use to help assess and monitor the effectiveness of a potential partner or existing partners that help your organization build capacity, maintain key positions, and sustain programs and services for your target population. So when it comes to the coalition building aspect of it, we don't just want anyone in a specific role, like just because they're this lead agency who's doing this great work. Everyone should be going through this partnership analysis. It's really like a SWOT analysis to identify their strengths, weaknesses, what opportunities can benefit the coalition and those threats, right? Hey, maybe they're not the best partner because of past political history that we're working to get away from, right? And so it's really a systematic evaluation of the relationships between organizations or stakeholders working together towards a common goal. Within that partnership, you focus on aspects such as resource sharing, right? What resources do they have based on what resources you need? The communication effectiveness. Have you communicated with them in the past? What their social presence look like? What are they doing out there in the community when it comes to radio or LTEs? All types of things when it comes to communication. And then the alignment of goals, right? Before we even address or reach out to this partner, what can you see about how they align with the goals of your coalition or the vision of your coalition? This is like the first step. This is before you even reach out to them. We're doing our analysis, right? It's just like a deeper process for making sure that they're a good fit long term. And helps to optimize collaboration. When it comes to the partnership analysis, I like to think of this little framework that I made up. called rare, right? Because it's like rare friendships, rare partnerships that last forever, right? You can't be friends with everyone. They typically won't last long, right? So it's like that rare piece of how we analyze who our partners are for the long term strategy and sustainability. Right. So first is research them, right? What are they doing? How are they doing it? What resources do they provide? How are they in alignment with our DEI goals, if that's yours? Things like that. So we want to research them and also figure out what their service area is, right? They might be a perfect partner, but their service area is outside of yours. And even if their service area is outside of yours, you might want to still consider making the ask. Then we're going to analyze and identify now that we've identified who the organization is, we're going to analyze their inner workings. What other information can we find about this organization? What have they put out that might build onto our goals or make us shy away from partnering with them? One example is I was helping an organization analyze another company, and they found some really disturbing information that they put out about communities that they serve. And so you want to be sure that you've done your detailed research to make sure that these partners are in alignment in every single way with your goals and your vision so that they don't jeopardize how you show up for the community. Two agencies are partnering, you might be looked at differently because of the person you choose to partner with. So these are really important things to be mindful of. Then we want to send that request. It can be virtual via email and sit down and say, hey, let's have a sit down conversation and talk about what our partnership might look like, what the ask is, right? I like for people to have a request that includes inviting them to do a tour of their agency or inviting them to an event where they can then have a deeper conversation, not just sending an email request to say, hey, I think you'll be an ideal partner. We should partner on this. That's not that long term strategy, again, because they also want to figure out why they should buy into your needs or join your coalition or partner with you on such initiative. So go beyond sending an email or sending a letter, and there is a process to that as well. And but that upfront work really helps to filter out those who you wouldn't think is the best partner, right? They might not be a horrible partner, but not the best for what you're working towards. And then you want to execute this opportunity or agreement, right? Like we talked about earlier, a partnership versus a collaboration is a contract necessary or just an MOU that outlines every part of the agreement or the roles of the organization. And that's key too, because sometimes people say they'll partner with you or collaborate with you, and then they don't show up or they don't provide the data that they said they would, or there's no process. So things are messy. There's communication lacking. So even including how often you guys are meeting, even outside of the coalition, right? To ensure that everything is still on track for the ultimate goal. So this rare model is the easiest way for me to remember that process to go through when we're doing the partnership analysis, which is like one piece of executing this whole entire relationship that can benefit the organization long term. Okay. Because you also want to make sure you're including those engagement pieces that keeps them engaged as a partner. And then those collaborative planning pieces that we also touched on as well. We split back here. All right. So, here are some ways to identify partnerships and collaborations. You can attend or host a community chat or roundtable, visit neighborhood association meetings without an ask, right? Go there to build relationships first before coming there with an ask. These are people from the community. You guys might be already familiar with doing these things, but if you are, that people can get really offended really fast and they don't mind telling you about it. I've been there, I've experienced it. I remember an initiative that I was working on where we were placing different flyers in collaboration with those community champions that we identified to support the effort. And I placed it in the gas station in their neighborhood, and oh, they had words for me. We, even in the smallest things, right? So making sure that you are not only going in there to build relationship without an ask, but also maintaining those relationships and having a clear understanding of who's doing what, right? And then attend or organize business networking events, right? Because you want to include those businesses, like the for-profit industry within our work. Literally, there's so much missed opportunities there because these people who work for profit businesses also have a huge heart for what's happening in our community. And a lot of the times, these decision makers are more than happy to buy into what you're working towards, and they have the funds to do so. Look towards attending business networking events to identify other people in different industries who are doing different work, but they're passionate about what you're doing as well, and seeing how those things can come together. Join quarterly meetings and share needs or opportunities with grant recipients. Man, a lot of grant recipients don't show up to these types of calls or training events where this is an opportunity to see who else is at the table doing similar work and how you can share resources, how you can share staff, how you can promote what's really happening beyond just the promotion that your organization is doing. When you go to these quarterly meetings, network, stay a little bit and talk about what your organization is doing. Stand up and talk about the wins. Stand up and talk about, hey, we have a resource need and funding staff, whatever it is. Talk about those things because if you don't, we don't know. And when it comes to the coalition building, tell people you're developing a coalition. We need more partners at the tables to execute this vision. They say closed mouths don't get fed, and that's the same essence of the work that we're doing. Conduct a partnership or stakeholder analysis, being mindful of even the community champions that we have at the table, being mindful that obviously we can't do like background checks on these people. Maybe you can, but at the same time, are they in alignment with what we're trying to do? How will they go back into their community and advocate or tear down this initiative? But it's also okay for some healthy debate, for people to be against it, because when we're only getting buy-in from people who are for it and not listening to people who are not for it, we're missing key information to make sure that we're putting that in our marketing or communications to address those hesitation to policy change, behavioral change, right? So being open to the things that people are saying against your initiative. And then also those stakeholders, again, they're going to know what elements are missing in our communities, what resources are needed in our communities. Even though we have these years of experience and degrees and all of these things, they really see from the grassroots level what is needed in their communities. Right. So here are some tips on how to recruit community members and request partnerships that will bridge gaps in capacity and support strategic initiatives. Okay, so invite those potential partners to lunch and have a clear outcome of what you're trying to achieve during that lunch period, right? Some people get off track and, oh, I forgot to talk about this. This is what it's about. It's a business meeting. We're talking business. We're talking about what our coalition is planning to do and why we want you at the table to help us in this effort. Host a site tour of the partner agency, collaborate with businesses on their day of service. That's a perfect way to volunteers at no cost for your efforts, right? Collaborating with these day of service within those for profit businesses, really figuring out what those days are or reaching out even before you know they're happening and ask these agencies, are they willing to have their staff volunteer to support your initiative? That's the only way we could. Again, power in numbers, right? So, how can you replicate some of those things within your coalition? What are you trying to do that you need manpower to do? And that day of service can be a great way to get more people at the table. And then you also might find some people who are interested in being a coalition member from utilizing that type of way to get support. During community engagement initiatives, right? So you're going to health fair, health event, conferences, right? We're not just there disseminating information, right? That's more trends. I can't even think of the word, but we're not there just disseminating information. We're there to also recruit people for our initiatives. And that includes the coalition, right? Let people know your coalition exists, right? They don't know because a lot of times you don't see people talking about their coalition at these events unless they are the coalition. You're someone here is just going to be an agency part of that coalition, but you might also know that you're recruiting for coalition. So how can you bring that need to this community engagement event to recruit? And people do the same thing for staff and volunteers, right? Your coalition might need a staff member. You just make the ask in these different environments, and you'll be surprised. That again is that ROI, the return on investment for your community engagement initiatives, right? Market the need or desire online and offline, social media, email, flyers, organizations who have ways for people to opt into their email list. Do you have a way for people to also find out about your coalition when they automatically opt in? Is there an email sequence in place? That means a multitude of emails that come out automatically for people who join your email list so that they can be aware of what's happening within the organization or the coalition without you having to manually respond every single time. So those are some of those ways that you can market the need and desire online and offline. The offline piece, you can do flyers. Again, you can go to these different networking opportunities to meet people in the community, meet business owners in the community. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but the number one thing is consistency and putting yourself out there is key.